At Ecolab, we partner to make the world cleaner, safer, and healthier, helping customers succeed while protecting people and the resources vital to life. At Ecolab, we are protecting what's vital.
Ecolab helps food service businesses rise to meet the heightened challenges of maintaining clean spaces and safe food to drive customer trust and loyalty. Ecolab provides innovative programs to help simplify operations, create confidence-inspiring experiences, and help advance food safety and public health.
Hello and welcome to ACF Chefs Forum. Today features a spotlight on women in food service leadership. It is so important for culinarians to connect, share, and offer inspiration and mentorship. This is why we're excited to have industry pros joining us to share information that's relevant for you, the leaders and future leaders of the food service industry. I'm Dina Altieri, ACF member and Director of Education and Training for Catalyst Kitchens. And I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar. We appreciate all of you tuning in today as we focus on the successes, opportunities, and challenges faced by women in food service leadership. During this presentation, we will be taking questions for the chefs live during this webinar as we are able to. Please be sure to use the chat function to collaborate with the other chefs and culinary students tuning in, and use the Q&A function to pose questions to today's panelists. Okay, so let's get the conversation going in the chat. If you haven't already, please let us know where you are tuning in from today. We'll take a minute also to thank Ecolab for allowing us this opportunity to learn more about the many contributions ACF members and other chefs have made to our industry. Aside from showcasing their craft and passion for food and the culinary arts, women have long been advocates for healthy food and nutrition, a better food system, and food security for all, as well as for equality and inclusion in the workforce. We know that this is a very important topic and that we won't be able to cover everything that needs to be said or discussed in our next hour together. However, we hope that this presentation sparks meaningful conversations in all of your kitchens. At this time, I'd like to introduce our 4 chef panelists. Chef Alicia Bosca, lecturing instructor of baking and pastry, the Culinary Institute of America, Hyde Park, New York. Welcome, Chef Alicia. Chef Jennifer Hill Booker, author, owner of Bauhaus Brewhouse, and president of Les Dames d'Escoffier International Atlanta chapter. Welcome, Chef Jennifer. And Chef Adrian Gang, culinary director, Blue Oceans Yachting. Chef, welcome. And lastly, Chef Megan Roberts, head of culinary innovations from Villa Dolce Gelato. Welcome, chefs. Chefs, thanks so much for taking the time today. I know it's busy, holiday season is upon us, and I really just wanted to make sure that you knew how much I am honored and I appreciate just being able to entertain this important topic with you, alongside you, and I'm very excited to get started with our questions. So there's so much to talk about. I really wanted to kind of kick off this conversation together, talking about, we all have been in this industry a while, and to many of us, a mentor has been a really important part of our journeys. So I kind of wanted to kick off with a question, and I might start with you, Chef Megan. How important have mentors been in shaping your career? And has there been maybe a particular mentor that has influenced you as a leader?
Yeah, thanks, Chef. This is one of my favorite topics because I've been very fortunate to have worked under some really great chefs that have been mentors to me throughout my culinary experience. So just after graduating from culinary school. I was fortunate to start working under a pastry chef named Linda Bajoni, who was very strong in the ACF and very involved in her community. And so not only did she teach me a lot about baking and pastry, but more so about life. So just having that guidance to help, really hone in where my focus needed to be. It's made me a better person, a better parent, and a much better chef. So she adopted me when I was 22 years old. So she kind of her and her family kind of became my second set of parents. So that mentorship is it's so important. And that guidance is, so appreciated. And it's very important for me to give back, not only to teach others in any opportunity, but to, provide a positive influence or just a positive experience. So, and that's something she definitely instilled in me, which I don't think that, I know that I wouldn't be as accomplished as I am today. And I just wouldn't, I wouldn't have all of the great memories that I've had in my career if it wasn't, for her and her being by my side quite a bit of the time. She passed away a few years ago. And since then, now, I'm in a manufacturing position. So it's a little bit different than, working in a kitchen. So I am the only chef here. So it's not, I don't have necessarily that chef to use as a resource and to gain guidance from. I have my CEO, which he's fantastic, and our COO. Since my mentor passed away, I actually started getting coaching. So just always having that person, to give you guidance, but to also hold you accountable too. So it just continues your growth.
Yeah,
on
I
a
appreciate
professional level and personal level.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I think that's more than what I anticipated your answer being, right? It's way more than just mentoring you towards what career path you were going on, but rather a more holistic kind of mentor, coach, life coach, and career coach. Chefs on the panel, anybody else want to lean in on that question just about the influence and importance of a mentor?
Sure, I'll jump in. And that's such a good question. And unfortunately, I did not have that experience. I didn't find a mentor until I was well into my culinary career. And then it was a male chef, which I wanted, a female chef to, like, what I'm going through. And as the ladies on the panel can attest, it's hard to find that. And I saw my colleagues and peers who were male to have kind of that brotherhood and camaraderie, and they had male mentors. And I didn't have that. When I did find my mentor, who was a male chef, Chef Joe Randall, who's just kind of took me under his wing in addition to all the other guys that he mentored through their careers. And I just learned a lot from him, just conversations about, what I should do versus what I want to do versus what will actually work, which are not always the same things. His favorite saying, he would say, well, baby, it's not gonna work just because you want it to work. And I'm like, well, why not? I think it should.
If
So
I will it to work, won't it work?
It will work.
Right?
But so I
Yeah.
found my mentorship from other females in the culinary industry through women's chefs and restaurateur organizations, or La Dames d'Escoffier organization, going to ACF conferences where I would get to see other female chefs in a huge amount. So that was just really beneficial. And I'm pleased to be in a position that now I can be that mentor for up and coming female culinarians. So it tickles me that they feel like I know enough to mentor them. So maybe I do.
No, that's phenomenal. And I think that's so important to think that maybe initially it wasn't about the gender of your chef mentor, but you were on one hand kind of seeking the advice of a fellow female chef, but you got, again, great advice from a male chef. I think so often I've noticed, and I'll jump ahead to a question that I wasn't going to ask until I was ready, and here it is do we feel as chefs on this panel that we're kind of categorized as it's a female chef, or it's a male chef, or in this world we live in, we have non-binary individuals, right? And so it's like, do we sometimes, are we sometimes not bothered, but concerned that we're still talking about things in terms of being women in the profession? Or do we still feel like we need to be really intentional about making space for these discussions about being women in the profession?
Yeah. I think we do. I think no matter what we identify as far as our gender, it may not, the culinary industry may not have caught up to that yet. And I feel that there are some needs that perhaps as a female that tends to be cast as the homemaker in the partnership or the mother or raising the children, that those are maybe things that has to be made space for in our career because we want to do both. And so, yeah, I think we still have to talk about it. The conversation is definitely going to shift as we evolve as people, but there's still room for that conversation.
Thank you, Chef Jennifer. I would agree. I think it's important to make space for it. That's probably why we are where we are today, you know, being given this opportunity to chat about things in this context. Chef Alicia or Chef Adrian, just give you an opportunity to lean in on that question about, do we still feel like we need to be talking about things as it relates to female professionals?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in, and I hope Chef Adrian will as well. I think it's an important conversation that has to keep happening. I think that some people in our industry like to think that we've moved beyond it, like to think that we've kind of bridged any inequalities that relate to gender or gender identity that might still exist in our space. And I think that probably every single person who is on this panel right now, and probably every single person who's watching this panel right now, regardless of their gender or gender identity, can point out instance after instance after instance where that's not the case, where women in our industry are held to double standards, women in our industry are asked to bear much more of the mental load that comes with the workplace. Women in our industry can struggle to obtain positions of authority or to maintain authority in the workplace. I think that these are things that definitely improvement has been made, and I'm so grateful for the improvement that I've seen over my career. But to think that we can now just sort of say, all right, well, we got past it, I don't think any realistic outsider would think that that was a reasonable conclusion. So
thank you, Chef Alicia. Chef Adrian?
I think I'm in a bit of a unique position here because of the nature of my part of the industry. I remember when I was doing my externship and when I was training ahead of my yachting career, that I did very much feel like it was a good old boys club. And it took me a little while to prove myself. But once I did, I earned the respect of the men that I was working with. And that seemed like something that I had to overcome at the beginning, but once I made it to that point, I feel like they accepted me and I didn't have any issues there. And for the most part, I worked harder than all of them anyway. So it is what it is. But in yachting, it's a little bit different. I feel like it's a little bit more of an equal playing field because if you're a great chef, it doesn't matter which gender you are, you're a great chef here. And because it's not a huge kitchen system in what we're doing, it's much more of an individual sport. The camaraderie among us is very different. Every Tuesday night in Fort Lauderdale, there is a chef meetup, and that's actually where I am right now because there's one tonight. And we all get together and the camaraderie is amazing. And we swap ideas and recipes and show each other pictures of the trips that we've done. And I feel like for me, the equality that exists between us here in yachting is very different probably than what a traditional restaurant or hotel or banquet facility would be set up as, because it is an individual sport. So I feel like, at least on my side in the yachting industry, there's nothing but equality among us and respect for our peers, which is amazing.
That's wonderful. I think it's interesting too, because when I first came into food service industry, I'm a CIA graduate. So Chef Alicia, I'm trying to figure out where you are, like which kitchen you're in right now in Hyde Park. But, you know, that's the one thing that I kind of loved about it, is it felt like being in a kitchen, like everybody was held accountable, like service had a start and an end, and like we all worked as a team. And I think initially I was pretty drawn to food service because it felt very much, you know, like a culture of accountability. But I think to the chef's point, I think both Chef Alicia and Chef Jennifer leaned in on this, is like when it comes to leadership, sometimes I think that's where it gets to be a little bit of a, you can kind of stagger into that, and not as maybe a comfortable flow as you had anticipated when you started in the industry. But I love the idea that there's like this sort of culture, Chef Adrian, where you work of accountability, and you feel like, and I like that you call it a sport, because being in a kitchen does feel a little bit Olympic at times, right? So I really love that. We have a question from one of our panelists kind of asking about the difference between watching their family members cook and getting into it professionally. So I'm going to go ahead and read the question, and then we can all answer it. It says, I have come from a family that has never thought or asked for me to cook. I watched my mom and my aunt and my grandmother, but I didn't really learn much. Is it hard to learn and catch on? So what I'm guessing is, it's like, is it hard to learn how to be a professional chef, right? Versus being able to be adept at doing it in the home. Chef Megan, go ahead.
Chef, I'd love to chime in because I have a 15-year-old boy who was, learned mathematics with, 3 different types of couverture chocolate, addition, subtraction, and multiplication. So maybe I threw him into a kitchen way too much when he was little, so has zero interest in ever becoming a chef himself. But as I strongly encourage him and any of his friends, like, cooking is a life skill. So it's, if you want to take it more serious and you want to, refine certain techniques, that's great. I mean, to be really good at something takes a lot of work, no matter what it is, being a painter, being an artist, it takes a lot of work, and you can have a lot of natural talent, but, you have to put in the work, as with any industry. But cooking itself, I mean, I think it's probably easier for some people to, follow instructions and follow a recipe. But I think the great thing about our industry, and I'm seeing more and more of this because I'm a part of, product development, which is like, formulation and R&D, and I'm a part of marketing. So you get to think on both sides of the brain in this industry. You get to be creative, yet you have to be strategic. So to me, I think it's a great balance. But I don't think it's necessarily hard. I think it takes, a lot of dedication and a good work ethic. So that comes along with it. So if you're willing to do that, then you can go far in our industry. So.
Great answer.
I would have to, I'd have to agree with Chef Megan. It is a life skill, and I find it's empowering to know how to cook. Like, if you teach someone how to cook, they'll never unlearn that, so to speak, and they can take care of themselves, they can take care of their family, they can cook nutritious meals. I will say that there are chefs that have more natural talent perhaps than others, so it may be easier for us. I'm gonna say I do, but I think everyone on the panel will say that they do. But we still have to study, and you still have to take your classes, you still have to re-up, there's always new techniques. So my suggestion is see what the nearest culinary store that offers maybe a basic knife skills class. Try that, see if you like it. If you do, continue on, and then perhaps you might even look at a culinary school if that's something that you're interested in pursuing.
I was going to say, for me, my family, my mom was really only good at making reservations when I was younger. So I didn't grow up in a household that was affluent. My grandma was a little bit of a baker, but I didn't spend my youth in the kitchen learning how to cook. And it wasn't until I spent a little bit of time in high school and college working in restaurants that I really appreciated the industry, but I hated the front of the house. So I was like, why don't I go back there and play with food and get paid for it? And that to me, you know, my culinary school background, but I would say 90% of the things that I apply now are things that I have learned, that I've trained myself, or I've told somebody that I know is really good at it to take the time to teach me. And, you know, being able to go one-on-one with somebody, or being able to, like she said, to be able to take a local culinary class that's not a huge, you know, semester long program, just to see how much you're really interested in it and how much you understand inherently and how much you have yet to learn, because I think that that's huge. So coming from somebody that didn't grow up in a household that was like filled with good smells and food, it was a little bit of a challenge at the beginning, but now I find it easy to go to someone and say, I know you're really good at sourdough. I know you're really good at this. Can you please give me some information and head me in the right direction?
Awesome. Before I ask the chef educator on the panel, I'm going to put a little interjection in here. Chef Adrian, it's so funny when you were talking, I was like, yes, yes. I remember being an educator, and you'd have about 50-50. You'd have, in a class of 20 students, you'd have 10 of them who came to culinary school because they, you know, learned how to cook from great relatives, and oftentimes the grandmas and aunties and moms in their lives. And the other 50% of the students in the class were like, nobody in my household cooked, so I needed to learn how to do stuff, and kind of came to it in the exact opposite, you know, angle or avenue. Chef Alicia, what are your students saying now? Why did they choose to start their education at the CIA, and kind of what are they thinking in terms of their starts and influences?
We get students for lots of different reasons. I myself was a non-traditional student. I didn't go to culinary school when I was 18 years old. I enrolled at the CIA when I was 28 years old. So I had started my life down a totally different path, but had always loved anything that had to do with food, but never considered it as an option. I never even occurred to me as a high school student that I could make food and get paid for it. It just didn't even cross my mind. So I came to it later. And I think because of that, it gave me some advantages, it gave me some disadvantages, but we still see a lot of non-traditional students coming to the CIA, which I think is wonderful. So people who are on their second careers or on their third careers and have decided that this is something that they have an aptitude for. I will say that to get back to the heart of that initial question, which was, is it hard to become a professional culinarian? I will say it can be very difficult. And I think, you know, Chef Jennifer hit the nail right on the head when she said, some of us have it and some of us don't. And, you know, my apologies to the Walt Disney Corporation, but the movie Ratatouille says everyone can cook. And that's true. Everyone can cook, but I don't think that that necessarily means everyone can be a chef. And I think that that's where the difference lies. And I think that, you know, again, as Chef Jennifer's mentor would tell her, just because you want it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that's unfortunately a reality that some people might have to face when it comes to being a professional culinarian. You can be an amazing home cook. You can be a highly skilled, highly gifted home cook, but it's one thing to be in your own space by yourself, where you know where everything is, where there's nobody, you know, sort of breathing down your neck saying, come on, let's go, get it out. We got to, you know, it's time to move. And then to be in a professional environment can be a completely different thing altogether. So in addition to starting out with a local small class, I also encourage people who think this might be for them to go out there and get a super part-time job. One day a week, right? One weekend shift or one weeknight shift in the type of food service establishment you think you would be suited for, and really get some good firsthand perspective on what it looks like out there. Because I think a lot of students start culinary school because they think that cooking professionally is like cooking at home but getting paid for it, and they're two totally different ball games. And so not starting on a culinary education before you have a really honest and first person experience of what that life is, I think would be financially irresponsible at this point. I would just hate to see someone potentially put themselves into a significant amount of debt, only to find out 6 or 9 months later that like, ooh, I'd like to cook at home, but cooking in a professional setting is not for me. So that's a very long answer to what was a very short question, but
no, I love it.
yeah,
I love it, Chef, because what I heard you say is that it's like it really, it's about the environment, not about the tactile hard skills of cooking, right? Because it's just a different environment. And I think when all of us are in front of the folks that we mentor, I know we all mentor people, is like, it's really, to me, very valuable to talk about like fit and what your temperament is. I mean, do you like an adrenaline filled environment? Great. A restaurant might be phenomenal for you. Do you like something maybe a little bit more, individualized? There's certainly parts of every kitchen that, could, I think, suit most personalities and most temperaments. But just to kind of pick up of what you were saying, Chef Alicia, it's like, it's more about the environmental thing, that pressure of service. Nobody's saying, I'm sorry, dinner's in 12 minutes when you're at home cooking for your family. And I think some people thrive in that environment and other people are like, no, thank you. Chef Adrian, I love what you said about maybe knowing right away you weren't drawn to front of the house and knowing that you were drawn to back of the house. That's also something that happened to me very early on in my career. I took a job in a French bakery, and they put me on cash register. And within like 2 weeks, I was like, ooh, people are nasty. I don't really think I've got the patience for this. And same thing, asked my supervisor, could you put me in the back? And that's where it all started for me. So I think environment is a huge thing to consider, especially when we're talking about truly being content and happy at work. Chef Jennifer.
Yeah, I wanted Chef Dina just to add to that, to say, in my experience and talking to other chefs, it also changes through your career. In the beginning of my career, adrenaline all day long. I wanted that hotline. I wanted to rock and roll. I wanted all of that crazy. And then as you go through your career, I'm like, I like to work by myself. I like my mise en place a certain way. I like the music a certain setting. And then I like to do events where you can pop in and get that rush from time to time, but not every single day. So I don't know how the other chefs feel about that, but I think I'm past my daily adrenaline rush. Unless it's coffee, then I'm here for.
But that's such a great point, right? Because as you're talking to especially like emerging leaders and new culinarians, I always try to say to them, wherever you start is likely not where you're going to finish. Like, don't worry about that. Maybe you are interested in that adrenaline, at the beginning of the career, and then a little later on, you kind of veer, you pivot a little bit. I think that's totally normal. As we evolve and change, so do our needs, and so does our work-life balance and all that good stuff. So I'm going to launch into the next question, because I think it's a good segue to ask you all about resiliency. It happens to be a word that I lean on a lot lately in my recent work with nonprofit organizations that tend to work with individuals who have barriers to employment. A lot of times when we're talking about new folks coming into our industry, we tend to talk about, oh, it's nights, it's weekends, work is hard. And we sometimes paint a picture of our industry almost feeling like a little bit too intense for a lot of folks. What I find myself doing is often trying to talk about the good stuff, the things that are rewarding about our career, the thing that keeps us coming and going back to work every day, right? So we know that the description of all of us on this call is, quote unquote, we work in kitchens, right? For all intents and purposes, we are chefs and we have, jobs in kitchens. Mm-hmm. But we do so much more. We do so much more as leaders, as mentors, as educators, right? As chefs. So my question is what are a few of the soft skills that you feel you've really had to hone to be effective in your jobs, and to sort of master those soft skills so that you could maintain the pace and the longevity in the industry that all of you have demonstrated? What keeps you strong? What has helped build your resiliency in this industry? It's probably not a great, julienne. So I'm talking soft skills with this question.
I would guess good communication, in the sense that being okay saying no or not right now, where we tend to, as women, period, women in our industry, saying yes to everything because we want to prove ourselves, or we want to show we're a team player, or we want to show that we don't have things outside of work at home that keeps us from giving 150% or whatever, that particular team demands. So being able to say either no or not right now has really saved me a lot of hardship, a lot of misunderstandings, and a lot of just mental wellness of not overextending myself.
Thank you for that answer, Chef Jennifer.
Yeah, I would say for me, one of the biggest things was actually learning how to ask for help. It was a really tough thing. And I think it goes right along with what Chef Jennifer was saying, especially as women. I think we don't want to be seen as incapable. We don't want to be seen as weak. We don't want to be seen as, in any way struggling, in a way that perhaps our male colleagues don't necessarily have those same concerns. And so I was always the person who was, like, never mind, I'll do it myself. I don't want your help. I don't need your help. And it's exhausting. I mean, it's just exhausting to sort of feel like, as Chef Jennifer said, you can't say no. Right. Or to feel like you need to shoulder the entire burden yourself. And I am extremely fortunate now in my current position as an instructor to have 25 fellow chefs that I work with on a daily basis. And that's just in the School of Baking and Pastry. If I expand to the entire faculty here at the CIA, now I have about 80 chefs that I work with constantly. And so it's just incredible the mental load that you can lay down when you can look to your left or your right and see someone that gives you the space to say, you know what, I don't have this. I don't have the capacity to take on this entire thing by myself. If you pick up just a little piece of it, now we can get there together. And so just learning how to ask for help and say, it's too much for just me, but it's not going to be too much for us. It was big for me.
Yeah, I would have to say, in the environment I'm in, just one of the soft skills that I continuously try to improve on, because I see the benefits instantaneously and over long-term periods, is collaboration. And just being able to collaborate with different departments and getting different insight, and being able to, take your idea, bring it to fruition with so many other people involved. It's so much more rewarding. And I think that, as chefs, we have a lot of pride, we have a lot of drive, and we want it to be perfect. But how rewarding is it when you can bring other people along the way? Not that it's you. I mean, that's, because not being able to say no, that's a constant. I'm not good at that. I don't know if I'll ever be, just people pleaser by nature. But what I try to do now is, I think, is not necessarily think it trying to make myself valuable to the business. I think, is this task valuable to the business? And if it's not, I try to remove myself out of the equation. And if it's not, then that's a hard no. So I can't say no, but I can say, no, it's not a good idea for the business. So
those are really good points too. And I think you talked about being a people pleaser. I think that's probably a woman thing first, maybe a chef thing second, right? It's so important. Do you have people on your team that you feel are really great collaborators, and then you have others on your team that you feel could use some little bit of coaching on how to collaborate?
Absolutely.
Chef Jennifer, how does that play out in a restaurant setting? The collaborators versus the non-collaborators in your experience?
Yeah, I feel like you do have that. As long as the non-collaborators aren't aggressively non-collaborating, right? If they're like, okay, I'll do it, but you're like, oh, that's fine. I don't care what the but is, as long as we do it, it's a teamwork. But if they're saying, I'm just not gonna do it, or for whatever that reason is, then you really have to get rid of that teammate, because they're gonna pull down the rest of the team. And use the adage of one rotten apple spoils the whole barrel. I mean, that is so true in a kitchen, because we're so close, it's so intense, everybody, and someone comes in griping or complaining or just undermining, it's got to go. They have to.
Well, and also kind of to pick up on what the chefs have said, right, is like you want to build a culture of collaboration, and you normalize that. Like Chef Alicia said, like her team, they've normalized this chat that they might have about needing to do it together versus being like shamed into saying, hey, I could use some help here.
Yeah.
And then having having like their teammates saying, well, you must not be strong enough or smart enough or whatever the enough is. And so just to normalize, like, no, we're going to ask for help when we need it, and we're going to go this as a team, not go it alone.
Yep. No, I agree totally with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, for my end of the industry, again, it's a little bit different here, but I have the advantage of oftentimes being in shark infested waters. So those people that are non-collaborators, I have the ability to remind them of that fact. So it usually motivates people to get themselves together and be a little bit more cooperative. But I do find, it's a very international industry. There's a lot of people that come from a lot of different places, and there's a lot of cultural communication issues that we can run into, especially when I'm working with people that English is not their first language, or they come from a culture that's a little bit more abrupt and a little less dynamically communicative. And so you have to be able to overcome those kind of things and work well together. And fortunately for me, it's all freelance. So there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And if for some reason there is someone on the boat that's not fitting in with the culture of what it is that we're doing and what we're trying to present to the guests, then that's usually a pretty short-lived situation. But it can be a real challenge. And I have found that there are several different groups that I have worked with over the years that either come from totally male-dominated, extremely chauvinistic countries and cultures where that's just the way that they treat other females. And it doesn't matter if I'm their boss, and it doesn't matter if I am 10 ranks above them. It's just the way that they treat females in general. And that has been something that's been a challenge for me over the years, is even if they're not in my department, just dealing with someone who has a mindset and has grown up with that their whole lives, that this is how females are treated and this is the way that males are meant to be treated. And so I think that's something too, that the more diverse, especially the United States becomes, that's something to be cognizant of with anyone that you're dealing with, is that sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's not exactly intentional. And I've come to understand that, but it's also a hard conversation to have, to be like, look, I'm still telling you what to do because that's the way that this goes. So let's just work through it. It can be a challenge, but at the end of the day, I think if you're confident in what you're doing and you know how to manage yourself, again, daydreaming about holding their head underwater until the bubbles stop helps, but maybe not the full solution. I don't want to end up in jail in the Caribbean. So I'm just...
Chef Adrian cracking up when you said shark infested waters, and was like, no, she literally means shark infested waters. Question for you specifically, Chef Adrian, is you mentioned earlier kind of the camaraderie in Fort Lauderdale with some of these different groups of chefs that you work with. Can you speak to if these groups that you mentioned, are they female only? And if so, what is the name of these groups? You have someone on the call very interested in maybe engaging in some of those at the local level in some of those support groups that you mentioned.
Of course. Currently I'm at Culinary Convenience. It's right near the airport in Fort Lauderdale. And they started a couple years ago, but doing a chef meetup every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. And it's amazing the amount of chefs that I've met here, males, females, doesn't matter. But like I said, it's not about a seniority complex. It's not about who's been here longer. I've met chefs. I was here last week and I met chefs that have only been in the industry for 6 months. And this is where they find their mentors, because this is one of the only places where we all congregate at the same time. Similarly, I have been to the ACF meetings in Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale and met some really amazing chefs there that are land-based, so not so much yacht-based, but Culinary Convenience services estates, country clubs, hotels. They do almost all of the equipment, high-end equipment in South Florida, and they do this for us just to give us an opportunity to get together, because like I said, it's a very individual sport. So being able to get together in a room with other chefs has been amazing. Mm-hmm. So I would say start with Culinary Convenience, because this is a great place to come. Tuesday nights, 6 to 8 o'clock.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Chef. There's another question in the chat, which is amazing that we've got some audience participation, obviously gleaning a lot of your expertise and bouncing off of some of your ideas. So this next question, just for all panelists, is it just as equal for women when trying to be a chef and open a restaurant? And maybe finishing the sentence, as it is for blank, right? But it's when we talk about equity, I think is where this question is landing. Have you felt in any way that it's been harder, different, better? I think that's a really good question to pose to the panel. So thanks for that question, whoever asked that.
I have a funny, I guess a bittersweet story. I'm divorced. We have 2 children. I was getting insurance, for the house, homeowners insurance. So I called to renew, and they're like, oh, well, you're single, so your rate is this. And I'm like, but it's more than it was when I was married. And they're like, yeah, sorry. And I'm like, well, what about, a policy for you fall in love, you get married, you hope it'll work out, and it doesn't, And they're like, yeah, that'd be a good policy. But as it stands, single women's policy for home insurance is higher than married or single men. And I find that, unfortunately, also equates to getting a loan if you're trying to open up a restaurant. Women tend to get more denials, more no's, and if you get a loan, it tends to be a lesser amount than the male counterpart. So the finances are a little more challenging as a female in the industry. So that part for sure. I think it was Chef Adrian, Chef Alicia, both, and I'm sure Chef Megan will agree. Then if you're in the leadership position as the restaurant owner or the executive chef, being that person that tells everyone underneath what to do and how to do it, you'll get pushback because you're a woman, maybe because it's cultural, as Chef Adrian said, or because it's cultural just here in America as well. So harder, yes. Unattainable, absolutely not. I feel that if you've grown up in the world as a woman, as a female, then you're used to working harder, perhaps. And so just getting your ducks in a row, knowing what you need finance-wise, knowing if you want investors, knowing how to run your operation as far as your employees, being very clear about who does what. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. I guess it's harder for women than men, but that's all I've known. So I guess I've come to expect it.
Thank you, Chef Jennifer. Panelists, anybody else want to answer that or lean in on that?
Everyone just smiles.
Chef Jennifer just dropped the mic. It's like, okay, let's just leave that there then. So another question for you all. I wanted to kind of lean in a little bit on self-care, right? Like, what are we doing to make sure that in this climate of, as you said, Chef Jennifer, not impossibilities, but challenges, right? And difficulties, what resources do you access to help you with your own self-care and your own balance? And how do you influence your teams to prioritize healthy behaviors?
I can
Okay.
start.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with you, Chef Alicia?
Okay, well, so I just want to start off by saying that I am incredibly fortunate in my current position. As an instructor, I think I have probably not the least stressful, but the least demands on my time of anyone on this panel. I have a very structured workday. My class starts at a specific time, my class ends at a specific time. We have a meal break that starts at a specific time and ends at a specific time. And yes, things crop up, a colleague gets sick and I need to cover a second class during the day, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So my life is much less chaotic than probably anyone else's is, simply because the nature of an educational environment requires structure. You can't function otherwise. Having said that, I think that I'm the worst person to talk to about self-care because I don't do anything self-care related. I don't meditate. I don't do yoga. I try to drink water and eat vegetables, but that I don't think qualifies as self-care. I think that just qualifies as, continuing to be able to get up and interact with the world. But one of the things that I think is so interesting about this question, and I say this with all the respect in the world for the question, because I think it's a really important thing to talk about, and that's something that our industry historically has neglected terribly. We rarely see men being asked about self-care. And I think that kind of speaks volumes to this dichotomy that exists still in our profession, which is that, there is this expectation that men are going to manage it and they're going to figure it out. And there's going to be someone there probably to help them to balance their life and to help them to make sure that they are doing the things that they need to do to stay healthy and to stay, mentally in a good place in this stressful environment. Whereas women, it's expected that we're going to be the ones to take the responsibility for ourselves, that there isn't necessarily going to be a partner or someone there who is going to help us manage this incredibly stressful situation. And again, it's subtle. It's not overt. This is not someone saying, women have no place in this industry. That's not what this is. It's saying, yeah, of course, if you're a man in this industry, somebody's going to be there to help you navigate it and to help make sure that you're achieving that balance. But as a woman, know that you're the one who better figure out how to achieve that balance. Don't expect that somebody else is going to provide you with that support. So I just think that it's one of those things that thank goodness we finally gotten to a place where our entire industry is becoming aware of the mental and emotional as well as physical toll that these jobs take on us. And hopefully we're going to get to the place where it's not just the expectation that women will take the responsibility for it, but that it has to be a sort of cooperative effort, and that it's going to have to take not only everyone in the organization, but the support system for everybody who works within that organization as well, in order to help us navigate this. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Chef, thank you. Chef Megan, did you want to add a few words there?
Yeah, I mean, as far as self-care, physically, yeah, it's very important to take care of yourself and get the correct sleep, exercise, eat right, but eat limited amount of sugar, which I'm horrible at, but that's just my job. That's my excuse, at least.
Says the chef with the background full of sugar. Fabulousness behind you. Yes. Eat less sugar. And there's gelato behind you on that screen.
I think that one important piece to self-care is to make sure you're continuing to get inspired. What that does is improves your mental state, and just to be inspired by others, by environment, by, situations, by seeing different things, or, Chef Adrian, I think that's awesome that you guys get together every Tuesday. It's hard enough for us to get together for an ACF meeting, but it just, what a great, opportunity to get inspired by others. But I just think that that, whether it be taking classes, like professional classes, we're just so fortunate to have so many things offered out there, either be online or in person classes. I think that that really improves just your overall like well-being, performance, and then anything you can encourage your colleagues to get involved in that maybe is not necessarily, that comfortable for them, but giving back to the community. Like our team is like, in the past 6 months, like just our team, they're awesome. Like, and I would not have said that 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And they are starting to inspire me. And it's just being able to take food and take what we do and take our craft, it's something that we're so proud of, and do something for others that inspires us. I think that that just contributes. And when other people around you are happy, and I mean, it tends to rub off on you too. So
Thank you, Chef. And what I'm kind of hearing you say too is it's just different for everyone, right? Like self-care could mean, as Chef Alicia said, she's like, I don't meditate, I rarely drink water, and sometimes I eat a vegetable. For me, it's like I have to make that very intentional time every morning just to just be quiet, like in my zen of my garden or with my cats or whatever. Like, and to your point earlier, Chef Jennifer, like it's evolved over time. If you would have said to me 20 years ago, Dina, what are you doing for self-care? I'd be like, what does that even mean? And why is that important? But now in my life, my day starts and it does not stop. It's a very, not sure I'd describe it as chaotic, but it's just busy, and everything is time, this Zoom call and this meeting and that thing. And it's hard sometimes when your mind is kind of racing through your day to remember to stop and breathe. And I don't know how many of us are stopping to meditate, but I often try to get a little exercise or meditation out of the way in the morning to kind of reset my stress clock so that I can start the day in a good way. Well, we're just about at time. I wanted to open it up for the panelists to kind of give just a closing thought on anything we've discussed or something that we might not have touched on before I wrap it up. Chef Adrienne?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as the self-care thing, one of the things that I have done, especially with a handful of the other yacht chefs that I have met, female yacht chefs, we have a small WhatsApp group, and it's just kind of a venting session where you can, especially if you're surrounded by people that you're not getting along with, stranded out in the ocean, which is very different than a lot of other situations, I understand. But it's one way that you can just lay it all out and get it out of your system, especially if it's late at night and you want to go to sleep and you just need to purge this from your mind. Like, we all understand the situation because we've all been there. So it's a really good way for us to all just get our frustrations out about the situations we're in where we might not have another person on board to talk to. And I would say, based on the people that I've met at the ACF meetings, that you can easily build a small network like that where there's no judgment, and it's not about you feeling like somebody's going to come at you because you say, like, this is this difficulty I have and I just need to vent. Like, it's a good resource. And I found that better than meditating, just being able to put it down on paper for somebody else to read, and them acknowledging, like, I understand how you feel, and take a couple deep breaths and we all got your back kind of thing is really important.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
would
Chef.
say also having setting boundaries. I know I like lists. I like to communicate through an email. I don't like 7,000 texts, because can you find the text number 7 when you've got 7,000 of them? And it was something that I had to do with my business partner, to say, we're going to communicate main things through an email. I don't set up any meetings with him before 10 o'clock, which sounds late, but he's up at like 5 full of coffee. So he's a maniac. So I have to get to where he's at before I can deal. And then just in my own business, I won't do any work after 7 or 8, which is hard. And you ladies know, like, we want to be working constantly. Like, we're doing stuff at 9 and 10 and more recipes or ideas, and just setting those boundaries has really helped me mentally. And not feeling guilty about having those boundaries was the biggest boon for doing that. Because I'm like Megan, I'm a people pleaser. I want to see how can I make it easier for you, often to the detriment of myself. So setting those boundaries, venting. Adrian is absolutely right. I have a WhatsApp group of friends that aren't in the business, but they'll let me, bitch about whatever's happening in my culinary career day. Um, and they have different insight, and that's always helpful as well.
I love that. Yeah, just kind of a non-chef crew
Mhm.
to bounce ideas off of. That's great. Anybody else, chefs? Wow. Well, go ahead, Chef Megan. Go ahead.
So the Melissa Koppel, she's an amazing chocolatier, and she has a school in Las Vegas. The way she ends every one of her classes is, I mean, I don't know if she ends them all this way, but I've taken a few, and the ones that are predominantly women that are in her class, she says, too often times, like, as women, we start to compete with one another. But we're here together, and we really need to take that as an opportunity to just build each other up and try to make each other stronger. So we might, be in a male dominated industry, but, and that's, non-binary or, female, but it's, just, we're in this together, and to be able to, push through and be successful together.
That's pretty, I mean, to me, that's really the most important piece. And we've talked a little bit about collaborative versus non-collaborative. It's like everybody approaches the work very, very differently, but we all know after being in this industry for years that it's just easier when everybody picks up a little bit of the slack. And it's not like there's no scoreboard in the kitchen for the person that like does it alone.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's to me, it's so important to, I guess, create a workplace culture that invites collaboration and kind of share. It's because you can still have little competitive bubbles within that are healthy, right? I mean, all of us at any point in our career, we've wanted to win something or earn something or be recognized for something. I think that's perfectly natural and normal, and it's healthy. But if the culture just is people kind of at each other and competing against each other, it's in my experience, it's typically not been the best environment. And to your point earlier, Chef Adrian, when you mentioned that, you have an international staff and you're interacting in an international landscape, is that culturally that's very difficult when there's kind of a competitive workplace, right? Because you're starting to tap into multiple different personalities and their impressions of things and that. So I always try to lead with collaboration whenever I possibly can. Chef Alicia, I'm sure your students are motivated by a lot of the competitions and things they see on television, and think probably culinary school is going to have a lot of that same vibe until you tell them, no, there's a rubric and everybody is scored on this rubric. It's not, it's not an episode of Chopped or something like that.
100%. And, I think two of the things that I try to really instill in my students is that first thing is that success is not a finite situation. There is enough success for everybody. Everybody can succeed. Everybody can excel. Something good happening to somebody else is not something bad happening to you. But also that really at the end of the day, the only person you're competing with is yourself. And that it's about the barriers you set up for yourself, but also the opportunities that you give yourself. And I think that if you can identify your barriers, then you can break them down a lot faster and give yourself more access to those opportunities.
Amazing. Thank you, Chef, for that. Probably the last, word of wisdom or pearl of wisdom before we close up today. So please join me in giving a huge virtual round of applause to our panelists today. You all were amazing, chefs. We appreciate each of you taking the time out of your busy day to, talk to us candidly about your insights and encouragement with our community of culinary professionals and any students that were on the call today. Based on today's conversation, there's so much to celebrate. All of your journeys have been, for me, very inspirational. I still need to learn about what yachting is because I'm excited about some of the things you mentioned, Chef Adrian. Definitely a little bit in my blind spot as I'm somewhat unfamiliar with that segment. So I'd love to pick up and learn a little bit more about that. Chef Jennifer, we've worked together on and off in the industry and been on panels together. I'm always inspired by you. Chef Alicia, just loving the fact that you're sitting at my alma mater at CIA. And Chef Megan, you're my neighbor here in the Valley of the Sun out here in Arizona. And I appreciate just being on a panel with you. It's our first and hopefully not our last. Please know, everybody on the call, participants, that ACF supports you and is committed to continuing to provide education and resources and to having ongoing conversations about how we can support all chefs, women chefs, everybody, in ongoing conversations about just the trials and tribulations to working in our industry. Let's make it a point with what remains of 2023 and what's ahead of us in 2024 to uplift and support each other as often and as fully as possible. Please be on the lookout for the survey you'll receive tomorrow with the recording of this webinar, which you'll need to complete if you'd like to earn your continuing education hour. You're all invited to join ACF in our hometown, right, Megan? Phoenix, Arizona is the home of ACF's National Convention in July of 2024. Go to acfchefs.org and click on the events tab to learn more about the event and register today. Thank you again to today's guest chefs. Thanks to Ecolab for your support of ACF and our educational programs. And thank you for all the participants on the call for tuning in, joining us, and giving us some really great questions to answer. Season's greetings, happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.